Why are we doing this event? And over the last number of years, we've realized that the Richards, the Brents, the Tylers, there's been an amazing amount of knowledge and a community built up around these topics, right? This transition of an analog mindset, which has been pervasive in the industry for many, many years, moving to a more digital mindset. And the digital savvy folks are not the ones that need to be converted, right? It's the analog folks that have been working for a long time and doing things fairly well for a long time that are seeing a lot of transformation happening. And it's a great topic and amazing to get such industry veterans here to share in. So that's why we're doing it. We'll have some fun. We'll talk about our tech at the end too, which is we're really excited about. So let's get started. So I'm going to do some introductions. First, I'm going to introduce Richard. Richard Aarestad is leading the construction team for Shape Properties. He's got over 20 years of experience on the construction side, general contracting side. Now he's moved over to the dark side, just kidding, over to the owner side and on the other side of the table now, and leading just huge projects such as the amazing Brentwood, City of Lougheed, Richmond Center, Uptown, beyond, all multi-phase, in often cases, multi-billion-dollar projects with a lot of complexity. So Richard, welcome aboard. Thanks for joining. Next, we have Brent Oland. Brent is a co-founder of Urban One Builders from 2001. And he is the VP of Sustainable Construction at Urban One and very much an innovator, someone who is leading and overseeing their projects involving mass timber, extensive prefabrication, high-performance building envelopes, all things advanced means and methods is Brent Oland. So welcome to the panel. Last but not least, we're having Tyler Brown join us, General Superintendent at Smith Brothers Wilson, carpenter by trade, 25 years in the industry, having worked 10 years as a project superintendent, and now is 6 years as General Superintendent. And for those who are joining and don't understand what that is, basically the General Superintendent is the superintendent of all the superintendents. so you have 10 projects going at once. One project's hard enough as a superintendent. You got 10 or 20 projects going. Tyler gets 10 or 20 times the headaches. Just kidding, Tyler.
Where I got all the gray hair from.
Exactly. So we'll try to keep it a little informal today. Before I start, I wanted to, if you want to go on Twitter and the social media and use hashtag DCW2021 and tag CAD makers, tag Shape, Urban One, SW, anyone you want, and just kind of share about this experience, that'd be fantastic. At the end, we'll talk a bit about some kind of call to actions about booking demos and things like that. For now, you can just go that route from there. Let's get started. Okay, the point of this is to bring value. First question. So we're going to start from one part of the equation and we're going to move to the future at the end. Brent, why don't you go first? So we've all had tough projects, right? This is especially nowadays, projects are getting more complicated. Building systems are more complicated. Schedules are condensed, often multi-phase, environmental impacts, these kind of things. We've all had projects that are challenging, right? Sometimes they don't go well. So what percentage or what amount of that would you attribute to either a lack of pre-planning or not enough pre-planning when building these complex jobs? Go ahead, Brent.
Well, firstly, I guess let's define a tough project as one that loses time and cost, because normally those things go hand in hand if they happen. Looking at it from my side, we've got up to 50 trades to manage on a job, and it seems like if a job runs over time, around 35% of the time, that's because one or more major trades you wouldn't expect to fail have failed either by way of manpower shortage or late procurement and delivery of their major equipments or financial capacity problems. And a lot of our work is vertical construction. So the schedule issues of one trade can very quickly affect the others. That's a little over a third of the time. Another quarter of the time, it's really that the design of the project hasn't quite caught up to the construction, in the sense that we've been asked to start the job when design wasn't ready, and ultimately through the construction they never did catch up in terms of the job being then built primarily off RFI responses and site instructions. Of course, that goes along with all of the scope changes, haggling over trade change orders, owner change orders, schedule extensions for the added scope to get built. And really, part of that, I guess, is 3D coordination that didn't happen, but with regard to the consultant side. On some jobs, the planning's not comprehensive enough. Occasionally, that'll be logistics, choices of equipment maybe not being sufficient for the job, like single hoist cab on a job that needed two, or sometimes it's on the contracting side, work scopes between the trade contracts, or not prioritizing the procurements enough to get the really key items dealt with early. On the site operations side, and from a planning standpoint, if there's turnover in the supervision, then the understanding and buy-in to the original planning of the project site itself may become lost. And there's also a lot of difficulties with sequencing and organizing of the trade crew size requirements. And so that kind of accounts for maybe collectively 85% of it. Another 10% of it is issues we might have with the client side itself. Delays from job permits upstream from them is the majority of that, municipal issues. But also late owner supplied items, or sometimes failure for the owner to get neighbor permissions for the project overswing and underpinning. So that's kind of how it breaks down for me. But really on the planning and logistics side, maybe that's about a quarter of it. And if you add in the design coordination that never really happened, that's another quarter of it. So about half of it really is boils down to not enough planning, whether it was by the consultants or by us or whomever, but not enough planning definitely factors in. And any hour spent in planning is worth, 3 or 5 or more hours of safe time later.
I tell you, we've talked about this, offline many times, but just Brent wants more time to plan. The owner wants less time because they got to, time value of money, they got to start building. And there's obviously constraints there. Some of what you did to Brent today, you set us up for later to come back and spike it down with the tech we're trying to build. But generally, that was fantastic. And I'll go to Richard next. So you talked a little bit about those constraints from an owner perspective. Now that you're on that side of the table, what would you say is the answer to that question in terms of, when projects don't go as well as you liked, what's the impact of pre-planning or lack thereof?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, a lack of pre-planning is definitely a factor in all tough projects, and perhaps we could say there's always more we can do. If we had enough time and resources, we could always do more. And maybe we could say even the jobs that go well, that aren't the tough jobs, we could have done even better if we'd had more pre-planning on that. And so, but maybe time and resources aren't maybe the only constraints. As you mentioned before, job sites are maybe getting more complex. New systems, new technologies, multiple stakeholders, incomplete information, as Brent said, lack of decisions in some cases on our part, unforeseen site conditions. Pro formas are under pressure too, of course, as we all know, and so spending money early or spending money at all upfront on pre-planning can sometimes be a hard sell if an owner doesn't really see the value in that or see the return on investment. And I also find the availability of talented individuals who can provide impactful pre-planning is a challenge. But part of that's not because they're not there, although that's a bit of a challenge too, but it's also just because they're so busy finishing up the last project, and you rarely get that sweet spot where somebody's free to spend a year of pre-planning a project. And then of course we have what I call the gravitational pull of the status quo, which is that sort of the ease with which we relax into our old ways, our old habits, and sort of accept some of this pain as inevitable. But thankfully, people like you and those on the call here see these constraints as not immovable. They are movable, and in fact, maybe even invitations to innovate.
Speaking of a lack of pre-planning and simulation, we should have planned the window washing behind Brent there in advance. Should have modeled that in advance. Just kidding. It's adding for a little bit of entertainment here. So
drywall dust here.
There you go. That fancy new office of yours, it's fantastic. Yeah. So, okay, so if we talked about the pre-construction executive kind of perspective from the GC side, now we have an owner perspective. Now there's Tyler at the end of the line on site, the general superintendent with a giant fishing net, catching everything that comes throwing on his way. What's your perspective from a superintendent perspective, and how pre-planning impacts projects that maybe don't go well?
Well, a lot like Brent and Richard already said, you can never do enough planning. Every minute of planning is worth so much in the field. At the other end of it, we're usually dealing with reactionary situations versus something that you've planned in advance and come up with the different variables and different outcomes. In the field, it often doesn't work out that way. A lot of it's due to contract delivery methods as well. Lump sum projects, you don't
collaborate with trades, or you typically collaborate with trades, but it doesn't mean that that trade is actually going to be the low trade for when you get the job. The contract delivery methods also play a role in how much you can actually plan for a job, and then get a certain subcontractor on site that understands your plan and actually can execute it properly. You're often left with a gap of trades that at tender time were awarded the job and didn't collaborate with you. They don't understand your procurement. Yeah, they understand the project at a 30,000 foot level, but you often are left with a lot of trades that don't understand your plan. It's not their fault. It's just a mechanism of a lump sum project. Some of the larger projects like what Richard and Brent work on, you have a little more wiggle room where you can plan all of this stuff out with key stakeholder trades, and that eliminates a lot of the long lead procurement issues and spatial requirement issues. But our industry is, especially our regional industry, is still really tooled for 50% of it's still lump sum contracts. And so that creates issues on a pre-planning end that then telegraph into what the superintendent and project team is left with on site. We have endless procurement and space issues on all of our projects. It doesn't matter what they are. We have stuff showing up unannounced. We have stuff that can't be offloaded because there's no place to put it. And the person won't, or the subtrade won't store it because it's direct to site. So on site, you're typically coming up with a new plan to get you out of the old situation almost all the time. And a lot of that can be mitigated. With new technology, we used to pass around emails and PDFs and you don't even know who read them. And then when you need to modify those as you would call analog documents, you still have you're not capturing your entire audience. Whereas I think technology and the digital technology, it's easier to digest for especially the new people coming up through the industry. Their mind is built to understand the digital world, not old people like us working with our fax machines and our PDFs. So I think 90% of the issues that we have in the field are some form of lack of understanding by the subcontractors. And again, it's not their fault. They're competitively bidding these projects, and they don't know which general contractor or construction manager is going to get them either. And they all have a different plan, so it's dizzying at that stage. But I think I'll probably be going down to my last breath, still saying plan more, but you just don't have the ability to plan more because of the delivery.
So you brought up some great points. Procurement model's huge. I know there's been some innovation around people trying to innovate around IPD and integrated product delivery, or P3s, or different types of models, and that makes a big challenge too. And at one point, as those who don't know, Tyler and his firm really focuses on highly complex, lots of horizontal type construction. And you made a good point about planning. Like Brent builds a 7-story parking structure. It takes 6 months to be in the hole. You have maybe a bit more time for those long lead times, right? So we're not necessarily, when Tyler's doing a kilometer long site that only goes down a meter, but it's times a kilometer. It's a lot of dirt getting moved, and you're kind of making decisions in real time. So it's a real challenge. So why don't we stay with you, Tyler? How about if you could just pull out some data out of that brain for 25 years, what are some of the overlooked details that often get mixed in pre-planning and then it hits you upside the head later in construction?
Again, I'll just go harp on the subcontractor collaboration side of things. Details. Listen, we have 200 more contractors on these major projects we had 25, 30 years ago, before my generation. There's a contractor for everything. It's exponentially created a situation where there's so much coordination to be done on a project that it's again, it's dizzying to understand it all. But I think procurement, and especially critical sub-trade data at the time that you're planning the project, long lead order items is an easy statement to say. which of those long lead order items are actually going to stop you from being successful, and other ones might have some sort of mitigation tactic that you could use down the road, either by changing it or expediting it. But we don't get enough subtrades. Subtrades are experts. There's a reason they call us general contractors. The subtrades are the experts. And there's many sophisticated subtrades in our local market. If you could just tap into that resource somehow better by using technology, you're going to reap the benefits of that. So I think the most overlooked, in my opinion, on the type of projects that we work on is procurement and trade sequencing. So what sequence does this specialty trade have to do their work in? Is there cure times? Like, a lot of those things are they're just a miss at the tender and or pre-planning stage when you don't have that critical feedback. So I would say almost most of them that in my mind will be linked back to that.
Well, you make a good point about bringing trade knowledge forward, right? And one project we're going to do at the end here, we're going to talk a bit about Brock Commons, 18-story mass timber hybrid building that we did with Brent and Urban One. And that's one of the big success factors, I believe, from the project, was bringing some trade input in early that was allowing for design assist. So maybe I'll throw it to you, Brent, next. What would you say are some of the key things that often get missed in pre-planning? And then, maybe it's obscure stuff that is not as,
well, not every job's a full BIM job, but for this question, this is a fun question for me because I'm going to answer it all with physical items on the site, and I'm going to separate it into design versus logistics. So on the design side, there's a lot of geotechnical anchoring changes for things like existing buried utilities that it was there, but for some reason nobody understood it was there. Poor headroom underneath transfer slabs, it can happen all the time. It's a tricky item to plan your way out of that one. Lobby or amenity ceilings, the height always seems to get reduced for the crossing of services, where if there was enough modeling of that, it might be avoided. Missing or incorrect locations for services where they have to penetrate out through the building envelope. That kind of seems to happen on most building designs. And also elevational coordination of all the hard landscaping surfaces, from the buildings out to the either street or sidewalk. That's another one that's commonly difficult to coordinate. In terms of logistical planning, there's not as many examples of this seen, but if they happen, they get pretty expensive very quickly. Like closer than understood proximity of overhead power lines to the building requiring changes in construction methods, different formwork, et cetera. That one gets very expensive fast. Or your newly constructed building gets in the way of the planned reach for how you're going to take the tower crane down. That one could get very expensive. Or a personnel hoist that is on a particular side of the building where you can't jack your crane down and get rid of it because the hoist is in the way of where the crane would have to jack down. We've seen all these things over the years, and that's always something that could have been avoided by more planning. So definitely the 3D tools really helps get the whole team onto the same mental frame of what's happening and when and why certain things can't happen in certain locations because other things need to happen there. And I think really the tools have an awful lot of promise now.
That's really great. I remember when we were in the past, you heard Elon Musk talk about the Model 3 ramp up. He used to say the machine that builds the machine is actually more difficult than the car itself. And in construction, there's a lot of technology gone into design and these kind of areas, but the means and methods, the how you build it, the nitty gritty, where you're placing the hoist and stuff like that has been a little bit slower to be digitized, which we're really passionate about, of course. Now, also we could talk about the owner's perspective, or even put on your old hat, your GC hat there. But Richard, how about yourself? I know you told some stories in the pre-planning here that were pretty funny about moving accommodations through a job, but what are some of the things that you've seen in the past that are often overlooked and can really bite you in the end?
Yeah, well, all the things that Tyler and Brent just talked about are certainly things that we've seen lots of. I mean, in a way, if you think about it as an industry, it's kind of crazy, right? That you could have just read off the change order log from, I don't know how many projects where we experienced the exact same issue. And so for sure, we can do better on that front. maybe I'll just speak about a couple examples that are more near and dear to some of the work that we do. And the first would be, we do a lot of work adjacent to existing malls, and they have operating retail tenants. And so there's a number of challenges with what we call the enabling works, the work that we have to do to the existing buildings and services to enable construction to start. It's critical path work, but often it gets overlooked because it's not part of the main project. It's sort of over there, and they'll figure that out in the field, right? And unfortunately, it's not, and it's yeah. So the pre-planning of site logistics, I think, is the takeaway from that. To execute enabling works is so important to really map out the sort of step by step. It's very sequential work, and so it needs to be mapped out step by step to permit the selective demolition to happen, to layer in when do services get relocated and how are they suspended to enable excavation to happen, and all it's in doing that, trying to make sure that the place is safe for the public and for construction access, et cetera. So that's one area where we've seen some challenges on multiple projects. And then the second would be sort of the overall site phasing. So this is more thinking about how we phase a site early on, like early stages in planning. In other words, which tower should be residential rental, and which should be market residential, and where should the amenity be located, and how do we phase it for sequential or phased occupancies, and things that don't really seem like a construction question, but for sure constructability input matters to those in terms of which ones get turned on sooner. And those are the two that come to mind. And the example I mentioned earlier that you brought up, Javi, is, yeah, we had a project once where we relocated our trailer compound 4 times, I think. One of the locations was under flying tables, so we had to like get out of the trailer for a couple of hours every week, and yeah, just not.
Flying form work is always a problem on the construction site.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, why don't we stay with you, Richard? Let's turn the coin over to the other side. So obviously we've talked a little bit about the headaches and the challenges. Let's talk about maybe what impact digital can have. A lot of what you described, I know on one project we worked closely together, even the crane was, the tower crane was moved up into the podium to from the foundation level. So, and that's obviously got certain impacts to the schedule, certain impacts to the sequencing, et cetera. So maybe talk about how you're working through these scenarios, and in digital paper, 2D, which is pretty much what most people, the vast majority of the market is doing, how challenging that is to communicate that to stakeholders, and for even you to assess from a risk perspective if it works. Like, what's the impact that digital can have on all this in the future?
Well, maybe I'll answer it this way. Hopefully it answers your question, which is, so I firmly believe in the McLeamy curve. And probably most of you know what that is, but if you don't, go Google it right after this. But in essence, it's if we shift the effort up front, where we can have the largest impact for the lowest cost, think of it as like throwing out a napkin sketch versus shipping concrete. And so if we're shifting that effort curve up front, because we believe that that's going to produce the best results, then we need digital tools to build prototypes of our site plans and of our buildings, because we're working virtually. And so, as we look at phasing out our sites over the coming decades, we have some very large sites. We need tools that will help us visualize the ideal flow over those from phase to phase, and what public access routes and construction access routes work, so that we don't end up painting ourselves in the corner. And then as we zoom into a specific project, then we need tools to assist our teams on how to thoughtfully pre-plan the complex sequencing I talked about earlier, and in a way that helps everybody from mall operations to building inspectors really visualize it and understand it. And the easier we make it for them to understand, the easier it is for them to approve. And of course, the one tool that we're most familiar with is the digital twin prototype, which we've certainly proven to materially improve our productivity and project returns. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's
no, it's. I mean, it's an interesting perspective, right? Like, we had a collaborator at this Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, Will Thompson, who may be on the call. So he's teaching a bunch of kind of next generation technologists, and one question that often comes up, it's like, oh, I'd love to go to this level of detail, but I'm told they'll just solve it on site, right? So from an owner perspective, it's kind of, I think it's probably refreshing for a lot of people to hear you say that, right? And say that there is a value to this. and you can quantify that. Now let's throw it down to Tyler. One thing I've been extremely inspired by with Tyler and his team at SBW is the passion with which they're bringing the ideas. Like, okay, it's great to do all this digital stuff, but put it in the hands of the person on site, right? Bring it to the site, bring the model to the site, bring the model to the people that are making decisions, surveying tools, total stations, these kind of things. So maybe Tyler, you've had good jobs before, you see the future. How does digital impact, you think, your business in the future from pre-construction planning perspective?
Yeah, I mean, our business is framed around it, to tell you the truth. We made the effort a few years ago to invest, not just financially, but mentally into technology, because that's a hard thing to do, like everybody's been talking about. Everybody wants to do stuff the way they're comfortable with doing stuff. It doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. It doesn't mean it's the current way to do it. We don't use fax machines anymore, but they still work. But they're not relevant anymore. There's better ways to move information. So what we've been trying to do is tie together proven technologies. There's obviously fantastic modeling technology like CAD makers available, and there's also sophisticated surveying equipment that and formwork systems that if you could pair them all together. We do a lot of our own forces concrete, and to be able to combine the schedule with the digital twin model, but not just stop there at the 4D scheduling side of things. Keep going, get that data pared down, put into your Hilti total station. So the people in the field can open up their project management software. They can figure out what they're supposed to be building, and they can go take the total station, which has the same model in it, actually shoot that in the middle of a rat's nest of other trade work and be almost 100% sure that that's exactly where that should be. And if not, have the ability to actually efficiently RFI it or get a clarification or send it over to a consultant who can look at it and instantaneously say, we made a mistake, we need to change something, or you've made a mistake and you're not in the right spot. We somehow over the last, at least my career, we've lost the capacity to tie things, all these great tools together. They all exist. They're low-hanging fruit. We need smart people like CAD makers to speak beeps and clicks and get the tools working together. But once you put those back in the hands of the people that have a passion for building, you'd be surprised how efficient they can be. By not adopting the technologies of today, you're really doing you and your company a disservice. They're not all going to work for you, but you have to find the ones that do work for you. That's my take, anyway.
That's great. It's pretty inspiring with your group. Talking about the kind of model to formwork set out with the robotic total station. I think some data on a recent project we did together, we quantified something like it was 6 hours in traditional ways, and it was down to 20 minutes, right? In terms of taking the model, exporting those elevations, shooting it on site. And now this really pushes you from the analog to the digital mindset, right? There's a lot of people not comfortable with this. This is a big shakeup in the way we work. But back to your point of like embracing digital technologies, I think is a great example of something that's really like going to be meaningful in the site. Now, why don't we finish with Brent? So probably of the group here, potentially some of the most advanced kind of means and methods is happening with Brent and his team. So obviously digital is a huge part of that. Can you talk to us a bit about kind of those good projects and the future and how digital tools may have an impact on your pre-planning?
Absolutely. And even for us, there's a lot more stories of not enough modeling done than having invested in too much modeling. So just to start with that, I mean, it's kind of on a spectrum. A small commercial building might not need much in the way of 3D design and planning, but a large academic building like one we're involved in right now needs very high amount of 3D coordination and ultimately prefab for things to fit together and also meet the schedule. Even on our residential jobs, we're using the digital coordination, at least in terms of clashing and coordination to help the consultants with footing elevations coordination, headrooms under the transfer slabs, services coordination in and around and through the building cores, and certain envelope aspects. But it's on our mass timber projects where the digitalization really takes center stage. It's got a well-defined, consistent strength. It's lighter weight, but more importantly for this, it's a highly millable material, both during and after manufacturing, and that milling can be computer controlled. So it leads us toward the production of more precise members and connections, which we can then use to achieve faster build schedule. To fully benefit from it, we start with 3D modeling, we go into 3D logistical planning, and we also include adjacent conditions. Sometimes we have to point cloud scan those into a model. Then we go in with 4D schedule simulation, and we start coordinating with major trades, and then we export structural systems, sub-assemblies and components to those trades that become parts of their shop drawings back to us. And then we can go from there with kind of direct instruction out of those shop drawings and files for CNC milling of the members and fit in the connections. Then we can also use optimizing within the model for how the building envelope gets panelized, how many different types of panels are there to collectively cover the project envelope surface. And we can also go into plumbing, pipe spooling, offsite assembly, and mechanical room prefabrication. And I've got other projects where we're going to be doing bathroom pods and prefab kitchens and cabinets that are attached to walls and things like that are all prefab elements. So it's leading to some exciting places for both faster build schedule, but there's also, to be recognized, there's higher safety and quality in doing some of these things off-site and not having to wait for the weather to be appropriate either. So that the digitalization ties in very directly with prefabrication and off-site construction of individual components and sub-assemblies that can be safer, higher quality, and go in faster on the site. This is all part of where the industry has to go to enhance productivity, and we might as well do it. And so we're doing it.
That's great. So, I was in a meeting with you last week, right, as a pursuit of job and using Cnbuilder to model crane tiebacks. You're looking at the angles saying, oh, geez, like if we have to do it this way, we might need custom steel connections. Why don't we move it this way? And can we get away from having to get custom steel built? So bringing all that data and that information, that intelligence forward is really quite inspiring. But we only have maybe 1 minute each top, so let's try to be real quick. We're going to ask one or two questions, and then we're going to dive into a live demo here of our product and some of the new exciting features. Let's go first with you, Brent. Let's pontificate a little bit. Let's get on our soapbox and talk about the future.
Sure. I mean, just two items I want people to think about is location and orientation-based enhanced virtual reality interaction with the model. So basically, as you're walking through, phones and GPSs and things might have to evolve a little bit, but as you're walking through, for the model to know where you are within the model, and that you can basically through your VR goggles be looking at what's really there and what should be there, and catch things a bit quicker on, for example, rough-ins that are out of position. Another thing that I was thinking about was using the 3D printing aspect to make models of some enhanced structural connections, and then you can make a negative mold off the 3D print, and then you can basically cast the connection. Maybe we might have new alloys or synthetic materials to work with, but basically cast some connections that would be strong, material efficient, and really beautifully aesthetic. The architects would love it, I think, and the structural engineers would be okay with it.
That's great. Okay, well, the big topics are on digital twins and flat pack prefab, kind of smart devices, sensors on site connecting to models. These kind of things are pretty futuristic, but it's coming soon. How about to you, Tyler? We talked a little bit about robotic total stations and that kind of stuff. Why don't you pontificate for a little bit about the future? What do you want to happen, or what do you think is going to happen in the next 10 years?
Well, I mean, I think I think us as leaders in our industry, we need to get behind this. All the people coming out of engineering school, all the people that are entrepreneurs coming up through the industry are all tooled and programmed to deal with the digital world. So they're going to demand that this technology is available in one or more ways. One of them might be that they won't come work for good companies like ours because we're behind the times. So I think you'll attract the best and the brightest of the industry if you stay current. And like I said, not all the technologies need to be used. Some of them are not relevant to different types of of our business. But we need to be open-minded, and we need to soak this stuff up. And at least if we don't understand it ourselves, at least put our people in front of it so that they can get immersed in it.
Great. Okay. Last but not certainly not least, Richard. I know you've messaged with me lots of times about different sources of innovation and what's happening, let's say in Switzerland and some of these types of places for the advanced robotics. We had lots of good discussions. How about you? What do you think the future looks like?
Yeah, the way I look at this is I'm pretty excited about the moment we're currently in. I feel like we're on the cusp of breaking free from the lack of productivity improvements we've seen in the construction industry over the several decades. And if we think about some of the relevant factors at play, so we've got skilled labor shortages, which will drive more reliance on technology. We've got tighter infill sites that require careful coordination. As Brent mentioned, we're seeing a shift to offsite construction, which really demands earlier engagement and therefore better digital technology to construct offsite concurrent with excavation and structure. And then there's a desire to eliminate process waste, as Andrew says in the comments, and incorporate lean construction techniques into the process. As Tyler mentioned, there's this demographic shift underway. Gen Z employees are going to be demanding increasingly more advanced technology to do their jobs, and the smart employers are going to be the ones that have it there to attract this scarce talent. And then combined with, you think about all the recent advances that are going on in the tech space right now, from internet connectivity to artificial intelligence to virtual reality, as Brent said, the augmented reality, big data, Internet of Things, 3D laser surveys, robotics, drones, 5G, and the quantum computing, I sound like an ad now, are converging really to provide increasingly more accessible and powerful tools. So we got lots of demand for the tools, and we've got the tools coming, and if they're not here already. And I can't even imagine, I'm not probably the right guy to imagine how to pull all those together, but I think there's lots of bright minds working on that already, and we're going to start to see more and more of that utilized in the near future. But maybe the takeaway is, in order to take advantage of these, we've got to shift the effort curve up front, and also we need leadership, right? There's a question in the comments about full team buy-in. We're not going to get it. The full teams aren't going to buy in, but it takes somebody with strong leadership to buy in and to show it how it's done. And yeah, maybe the takeaway, this could all be boiled down to a simple saying, which a carpenter told me once, which is measure twice, cut once. You're on mute, Harry.
Oh, the most popular statement of 2020, you're on mute. I fell for my own trick here. Okay, so that was a great way to wrap it up. There's some great questions here. We are running a little bit short on time. We want to show you a little bit of cool, innovative technology ourselves, but I will, Jeremy Vigay, you asked a little bit about what other pre-construction processes would you recommend? I'm going to recommend something to you in the next 20 minutes here, something we're building. You answered Andrew and Guillermo, thank you. And one other question that came in from Mark about barriers to adoption. I'll answer this one. There's been a lot of like, oh, I'm building AI for this, or I got this technology, let's go find a problem to solve. And I think one of the biggest challenges we have in our industry is starting with the problem and working backwards. Okay, well, what are people going to actually use to improve their lives, improve their work? And one big barrier to entry is building stuff that's far too powerful for the actual addressable market, right? Starting with what people can actually use and impact. And with that, I will lead into our little demo here of our product, Cnbuilder. Pedro is going to share his screen, and we'll work through here, because a lot of what we're trying to solve with this project is exactly this. There's this idea of getting removing the barriers, getting people to be able to access using web-based technologies, digital technologies, mobile technologies. And we'll get started. So I have Pedro, who's on the other side of the table, physically distant from me, helping me. So I'm going to talk and he's going to click. And I will ask for some of Brent's assistance here. This project looks a little familiar to you. Hey, Brent.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. So what is Cnbuilder Io? The idea is it's a fully web-based, 100% web-based. So there's no app. It just runs in the browser. It's a 5D, so 3D, 4D, 5D, 3D being the model and geometry, 4D being the schedule, 5D being the cost, site logistics, planning, and simulation product. So the idea is to actually use data and intelligence, not say digital paper or 2D with Excel, to just easily lay out your construction site, simulate how you're going to build it, find risks, optimize, and then share easily with your stakeholders. Now, our goal of this product is to democratize digital construction. We want to bring a high value, low effort, low cost solution to the marketplace that allows rapid simulation, different scenarios, what's 2 crane versus 3 crane. Yet the fully parametric, all the resources coming out of Cnbuilder are fully parametric if it makes sense to be. So we'll show you the cranes are fully parametric, the hoist, etc. We'll show you in a live demo. Now, some things don't need to necessarily be parametric depending on the resource. Would be cones. It is still laid out parametrically based on like rules, but the parametric aspect, it depends. So why are we building this? And last thing, open BIM. So the idea is, we built our own converters from IFC 2x3, IFC4, Step, and FDX. Work in a Revit, SketchUp, Tekla, CATIA, it doesn't matter. The idea is that you upload the model in here, and we actually have if you don't have a model, you can also create massing inside the product directly in the browser. It's very easy to do. We'll show you that. Why do we build this? So a lot of the themes we talked about today, right? This is just us providing solutions into the market, listening to people tell us their problems. And a lot of, pretty much 95% of the addressable market we deal with do their site logistics plans using what I would call a digital paper workflow, right? Basically a 2D PDF editor with some Excel. And this is the analog kind of process we're talking about. Once you flatten that and send it, email it, it's gone, right? There's no data, there's no intelligence. It's really hard to learn. It's really hard to scale from job to job. Richard mentioned how you're making similar mistakes over and over again. It's really hard to have that in a database.
Javier, I just want you to stop the screen there with where it says week 55 on the top of the drawing, and just to point out that the way we used to do this was literally tabloid size flip charts of paper, and you had to actually draw the stuff on there. And heaven forbid you didn't draw things right on one of them, you had to start over. And we did jobs that were 10 to 24 months, where each month end was a flip chart of how the logistics were going to be. Now, mostly multi-building sites, but this one here, one building, it certainly still helps to have the time scale shown as to what's happening and really can walk people through how the site's set up a certain way.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, at the bottom, or the scale market is kind of like 2D PDF editors, Excel. Top end of the market, you have maybe higher value solutions, but they're sophisticated. They require locally installed software. You need to be trained, expensive machines. So it leads to a lack of scaling in terms of industry. So by us starting from scratch, literally from scratch, and building it from scratch with customers on the front lines, the idea is to truly transform the digital workflow of pre-construction planning and superintendents moving forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to start live here. So this is a construction site. We've snapped in a drawing. We've overlaid that onto our site. When you start in Cnbuilder, you put the address in. It creates a map tile. You can choose with topography or without topography. This is a flattened view. And then you have a whole suite of tools to start planning your construction site. So what Pedro is doing right now is he's saying, okay, let's use Jersey barriers on the roadside, and then just a traditional chain link fence. As you can see, every time you place a resource, this is parametric modeling happening directly in the web. So you're just clicking directly in your browser and generating new geometry, new information, and laying out your construction site. I'm sure Brent
is stretchable. That's the way I like to describe parametric. It means you can stretch it, but you can also add rules to it that say, if you stretch it beyond a certain amount, it adds another post inside of it or things like that.
Correct, exactly. It's a rule-based. So now we're starting to do fencing. Now let's start doing accommodations. So again, we haven't done anything with a model yet. We just have a drawing that every job has. Often in early stage logistics, you might only have a drawing. Snap that in, and you go into a catalog of parametric resources. Just let's lay out our trailers here. So if you have a parametric trailer, you can start planning, okay, if I'm going to have over 50 people on site at any given time, we need to have 4 porta potties. We have to have the appropriate amount of accommodation area for your trades, your sub trades, and laying it all out. I know the actual project, Brent, you didn't have that much space, so good job, Pedro, by cooking the books.
Eventually,
cooking the books. Yeah. So we're not going to do every single thing here, but you get the idea. Let's go to traffic control. Huge on just about every site, especially those downtown sites where you have really tight sites, postage stamp sites. So let's start thinking about logistics around traffic. So cones, are you going to have to shut down one lane of the road during construction time? Do you need flaggers? How many flaggers they are? And one thing we didn't do that I was supposed to do, which we'll show you in a second, is every single thing that you're placing here into the scene is automatically syncing. We won't show it now, Pedro, let's just keep going, but it's placing into a master format cost histogram of your general conditions. So this is only the GCs required for operating the construction site. So if you have an 18-month build and you need crane from month 3 to month 17, you're capturing all the costs as you place it in the scene automatically as you're adding things to the scene. So if that flagger has an X dollars per hour rate, all that data flows into your site and logistics. Okay, so now we've started thinking about, you get the idea. There's a whole swath of site logistics plannings out of the box. Let's start thinking about excavation, Pedro. So let's get on top of the model. You can go in 2D or 3D mode and start planning the excavation. For now, we have kind of this drawing here that helps you guide. If you have grid lines, you want to reference inside Cnbuilder, makes it a little easier. But let's just, Brent, I'll ask you the question. You remember this job? I know we spent quite a bit of time in the ground coordinating. How deep roughly was this excavation? It was a pretty shallow one, was it a few meters only, right?
There wasn't really a basement, but we had some deep core footings, deep tower crane base, and underground water storage tank. We had to coordinate those things with all of the underslab plumbing. And one of the things I liked about working with you guys and the model was we could kind of imagine that we're in the ground looking up at the underside of the model as it pertained to all the footings and the coordination, and ask some of the right questions then about how to solve some of the problems with getting the plumbing from point A to B through all the footings without losing slope to drain.
There you go. Okay, fantastic. So this is a very shallow excavation. What Pedro's going to start doing now is visualizing the construction site during this milestone. So at the top here, as he's going, he's basically creating his 4D schedule and his milestone, saying, okay, I need to start excavating on this date. We're starting from the east side to the west, or however you want to do it. Now, we'll talk about at the end. We have a whole huge system coming for excavation planning. But the idea is you can start visualizing, access, especially if you're doing phased excavation or detailed excavation versus bulk excavation, et cetera. So you can select that excavator, what dates are they going to be on site, and then store that as a milestone. So when you send this, which we'll show you after, you're actually just going to be able to send a link and you can visualize that. Now, one thing that's nice here, we've brought in the model. In this case, there's a BIM model created. You don't always have that, but you can start planning your sumps, footing elevations, slab on grade, this type of stuff. Now that we'll get to the next topic here, which is placing the crane. It's a big discussion. Just about every job, placing the crane is something that keeps people up at night. So now that we have the footings and foundation kind of visualized on the site, let's go ahead and show you 2 ways to model your crane on a construction site. The first one is just going to be going into equipment and vehicles, into your fixed cranes. We're going to grab something similar to what actually happened in real life, which is a tower crane located roughly there. So you just click and click. There you go. You got your tower crane. You can adjust all the parameters directly in the browser. You did a left-hand crane in this case. And then you can start to kind of like move the site. So this is a top-down approach where you actually have a smart parametric crane that you can start to toggle the different parameters. Say, okay, this is the best possible crane. Make sure you can make all the reaches for your laydown area, boneyard, all that kind of stuff. And then place that and visualize if it's not going to clash with footings, any issues with like sumps or below grade plumbing when you're placing your crane pad, for example. Right now, since we've done this job, Brent, we've tried to replicate Brent in an AI. so I want to show you now, which is a brand new feature we just launched, is with our AI-based crane location optimizer. So option 1 is you can just model it. So as a user, you start modeling on the site. Now what's coming, it's being pushed hopefully by the end of the week, if not early next week, is this process workflow where you start saying, okay, what are the critical lifts? So let's say you have an air handling unit that's 2 meters wide and a certain weight, 1,500 kilograms. Instantly, you just click on the building. So I got an air handling unit on the roof. It has to be located there, inside the steel in this case. Next step, you just start selecting your available cranes. No, I would do 2. Go back. So click those 2 that have data, that one and that one. There you go. So now you have a couple options of cranes. Next thing you want to do is define your loading area. So you have to put your loading area and figure out what it is. We've already done it in this case where materials are coming to site. Now, really important, stay here, Pedro, go back. No fly zone. So if I think it came up in one of the talks where you don't have a permission to swing over the adjacent property, you can start to define that inside the algorithm, avoid zones and stuff like that. And then you can kind of define this before you run the optimization. Next, you're going to click into the minimum distance to the building and how many cranes that you're allowing in this scenario. Now, this is a pretty easy one, but let's run it. So this is happening live. It's going to take, whatever, depending on how big the algorithm is, it might take anywhere from 10 seconds to 5 minutes, depending how complex it is. So what's happening right now is this genetic algorithm is going through all the selections the users defined, and it's actually going to create for you a bunch of different solutions. So this solution was interesting for you, Brent, right? You mentioned that if you were to do it again, you might add a second crane potentially to increase the cycle times and put them on the corners. So
we went fast enough, but
yeah, it was very fun. We're going to come back to that. But the really nice thing here is that you can just click through and say, okay, here's the suggestions coming from the tool, and then as a user you define. Now this is a pretty simple one. Let's go to a more complex one, Pedro. We've already run. So this is a project that could have 3, 4, even potentially 5 cranes. Has lots of multiple picks. Has lots of issues with where you're going to have your laydown area, et cetera. And we've run this in advance, but this is where it starts getting extremely valuable, right? We start having what's it look like at 3 cranes, 4 cranes, 5 cranes? What does it do in cycle time? What does it do to the schedule? Yes, you're paying more per crane, but you're reducing your schedule. Is obviously paying back for the owner faster, and so on and so forth. So we're really excited about this feature and providing more options for users to select the most important resource on most construction sites, the crane. Let's go back into the 4D scenario here. So now we're going to go to Brent. We're going to talk to you pretty much Brock Commons. The goal was to build the concrete and the cores in the winter months, from what I understand. Roughly, what was it, about 4 months? Sorry, from bottom of the ground.
4 months, yeah, around 2 months in the ground up to the podium, and another just over 2 months to build the cores.
Right. So we've started to simulate that.
That was with 2 stories at a time jumping form system that we had to come up with. Normally, the cores would have gone more slowly than that by about a month.
Great. So what we've done here is inside Cnbuilder, you bring in your model and you just split the model and say, okay, I want to do 2 floors a week on the concrete cores. And then we want to show maybe a detail. You can hide the envelope of the crane. It will probably help you a little bit visualizing it a little easier. So you go into the tools, you hide the parametric envelope. So you've used some of the biggest things on this project when you want to tell your story, where the connections from concrete, wood, and wood to steel, like those are the important things. So you can start inside your 4D scenario, drilling down even markups or different ways to analyze, in this case, the connections for the columns and when the columns and the panels come together. So again, this has already been set up for us, where you start saying, okay, now it's about 2 floors a week. If correct me if I'm wrong, Brent, was your cycle times?
Yep, 2 floors a week.
And then those outriggers that were bringing in the materials on, leaving those unitized curtain wall or unitized facade panels out was a strategy, from what I understand as well, right? You wanted to bring weight into the building because the mass timber is generally quite light structurally. Was that the idea?
Yeah, I mean, we were able to close up obviously the bottom half of the run there by the time we were using the top half, but yeah, we did it that way. Okay,
good. So now the really nice thing here is I'm actually going to share my screen from my phone. So the idea is normally you would do a PDF, stop sharing, and I'm going to share my phone. Hopefully it'll let me here, share my screen. Hopefully my mom doesn't text me. She was texting me earlier. She's going to tell me about how I never call her. Okay, let's try this. Is it working? Oh boy, here we go. We've tried this a lot of times. Start broadcast. Okay, tell me if you guys can see it. You're good. Oh, I'm sharing my screen. Yep. So now I'm seeing, so in advance, Pedro has sent this. This technology is fully web-based and is optimized for mobile. So if I just want to click through that same scenario that Pedro just gave me and say, okay, I want to visualize my below grade plumbing, I can do that. I keep running through the simulation. Here I'm going to start, okay, when I have the crane come in, I'm going to visualize where I'm going to have my mobile crane help install the tower crane, and so on and so forth. And we'll actually drop an example in the chat after we're done here. But the idea is that you can do it yourself. You can run the simulation in presentation mode, which will allow your client, let's say you're sending to a city inspector, they don't necessarily want to, you just push a button, it's called play, and it plays the 4D simulation and explains your site logistics much better than what you would do in a PDF with hashed lines and radiuses of cranes all over the place. So it's a one-click share type scenario. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Pedro's back. Good. Now, if we only have 6 minutes left, so let's talk about if you don't have, actually, let's go to the 5D cost histogram. So you just saw we've placed all this stuff live inside to the scene. What it's done is if you set up your database correctly, so you have your costs, your demob costs, your different types of incremental costs for different resources, it's automatically going to push here into this is the 5D element where you can kind of go through, in this case, by master format, get an idea of real-time costs. I remember talking with Tyler a long time ago when they were planning jobs at occasionally early stage users say, I need a trailer or two, and they're $500 a month. And how many months do I need it for? I'm not sure yet, right? You can start really saying, okay, I need 5 trailers for $500 a month for 18 months, right? And start and really add that up. And then every time you use that resource in any project, it goes in the database. So next time you're building a 18-story mixed use, or sorry, an 18-story hybrid mass timber concrete building, all your costs, your actual costs, you're going to be able to use it in the next pre-planning, right? So you're using the data that's coming from previous jobs to inform the next planning job, right? To understand and track these costs, okay? So let's get back into the massing. Now, a lot of times you're going to say, what if I don't have a model? So we've built, a basic, but still somewhat powerful massing tool. So directly inside the application, you can just say, snap in a drawing, get an elevation, say, okay, floor to floor heights are X. Here's the geometry of the building. And you can actually model this case, Vancouver House, pretty complicated project. And overall, it's pretty easy. You judge the floor heights. Really, for site logistics planning, you want to know where your boundary conditions are, right? Or where your access is going to be, where the crane tieback needs to be, these kind of things, so that you're able to do that directly in the product. Now we want to talk about markups. We just pushed markups. Let's go back into there. We just pushed markups, which tie to your 3D, your 4D schedule. So if you want to be able to say, hey, Brent, we're looking at your connections from the CLT panels to the core, which was a really critical thing. You can store a markup, and the camera is going to go down here. You have dimensions, you have sections, information. You just click through. So this is another way to make it really easy to share this information just with a web link directly to any phone. Click, 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 and the actual presentation, the camera moves to show those areas. Really good for when you're talking about constructability, right? When you're saying, hey, am I actually going to be able to access and install this member that we thought we were going to? You just create a markup, and you can link it inside your schedule to say, at this point, I think it's a risk to do XYZ sequence. Okay, so what we're going to do is Pedro's going to show you how you just, instead of sending a file, now you can do 3D and 2D. So let's go back to the main one. So you can do 3D and 2D. So you can go 2D mode, 3D mode. We're going to be cleaning up, adding more features to the 2D for like title blocks and be able to put your kind of legends and everything. That's really nice. Right now it works to export this as a PDF, but the nicer way to do it, in our opinion, is just share the link. So what Pedro's going to do, we'll have it expire tomorrow. And he's going to drop it in the chat here. So what day is it today? Yeah, so have it tomorrow, but with presentation mode, please. So you can select with presentation mode and then 1 second delay, and it's going to generate a link. We're going to drop this in the chat here to everyone. You're welcome to click this with your phone. Click this with your computer and run it. So now you're the persona of the client or the stakeholder, maybe the city inspector, your client that wants to validate your sequence. Now in the product, you can have multiple scenarios. So you could look at 1 crane versus 2 cranes. So 2 crane has 2 hoists, double core hoists versus single car hoists. All those resources are directly in the product. And if 1 click, you can share. You don't need credentials, you access the link and they're in there. So my last kind of call to act, I should probably say the next big features coming are, and we talked about this with Brent, excavation planning. So we're going to be able to model your excavation, do your bank volumes and detail excavation, figure out if you're going to do anchors versus shoring, etc. We're also going to have a whole bunch of other features coming around optimization soon as well. So we're really passionate about this. And again, the idea is to democratize this, make it easy for anyone to use, superintendents, project managers, not just the techies, and be able to just replace kind of more analog ways of doing this work. So my call to action is, if you're interested in this product, please go to Cnbuilder.io. You can request a private demo. You can start your free trial immediately without, it won't bug you. I might email you to welcome you in and give you some links. But we'd love for you to try it out and go from there. I think we're literally on the minute. Did I miss anything? Is the software prepared for lineal civil works? It is. It depends how linear, and Tyler and his team tested us to the max. We had to get the devs involved and increase our map tile size. What did we get to, like how many kilometers? We're up to the large map tiles. So we're at about 1, as long as it's not longer than 1.5 kilometers in size right now anyways. And if you're larger than that, talk to us and we'll see what we can do. But yeah, if you want to do like multi-phase, more horizontal work, the product works well for that as well. Of course, the features we're showing is more vertical in this case.
There's another question about
Yeah, so I answered that. So the resources inside the product itself that come out of the box are parametric, and what you upload from, say, Revit or Tekla or CATIA, et cetera, it depends on how the model was formed. And you can access that data inside the tree directly in the product, but it also, the idea is the model is there for a reference to simulate your construction site and do logistics. Okay, I don't want to take you one more minute past the time. Brent, Tyler, Richard, thank you so much for doing this. This is amazing. That was a lot of value brought. I think some cool stuff about the future. We're fortunate that we get a chance to show you what impact we hope we will have in the future, because we want to bring high value, low cost tools to the construction industry so everyone can work in a more digital way, share links, not files, and use data and intelligence instead of anecdotal data or just knowledge inside our heads. So thank you very much for this. I hope everyone enjoyed this. Maybe we'll do this again. We have another one on Thursday focused on digital execution, so more on the production tracking side of things. But hopefully we can do another construction-based one in the future. So thank you very much. No one can do this, but we'll do a slow clap for Brent, Richard, and Tyler. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye guys.